What is going on, Nuggets Nation, NBA fans? I'm Tom Leuthner. Welcome back into Nuggets today. Before I even start, you see there's a different look here today. Got rid of the beard for a couple days, but this episode is gonna be a follow-up episode on last episode, which is all about the Josh Kroenke and David Adelman presser. I know that it happened a few days ago at this point, but I do want to finish covering things that I saw, things that I like, things I listened to, and things that I think should be broken down. And the first thing is the realization between Josh Kroenke and David Adelman. I think is a major factor in what could be a successful offseason for this Denver team, obviously. I know that Adelman is a newer head coach, and I know that we got a glimpse of what he's able to do as a head coach, but everybody's skeptical, including myself, because he was only given 3 regular season games and 2 different playoff series. And I know that seems like a lot, but realistically, it's not. When you have a team that's been together for a core four, at least, that's been together for a little while, and guys that you need to develop and new guys that you need to bring in. Like I said in yesterday's episode, I do think there are some things that he said that are good, which is how he wants to develop players, how he wants to work on game plans, what he wants to incorporate into players' offseason workouts. So I do think that there's some good with the bad, and that's something I'm going to get to in a little while, obviously. But I do think that there's positives with the development of the Denver players, like I've been talking about, Julian Strouth or whatever. Trey Alexander could be good. Obviously, we're going to cover the Westbrook update because I think everybody knows that that episode is going to be coming. This is more important to me to cover, so this is what I wanted to cover. He also realizes, David Adelman realizes that the conference is going to get harder even with the draft. Not even the offseason signings. His realization of knowing that this is not going to be the same team as last year and it's going to have to compete. Different players are going to play strictly because look at the Spurs. They have a high draft pick. Look at the Mavs. They have a high draft pick. Teams are going to trade those picks. Maybe not the Spurs and Mavs, obviously, but teams are going to trade their picks to either move back and get other players or move up and get rid of some guys. So I think that the realization is a massive factor for Denver to come out and actually progress as an organization. I do appreciate that he did not play the victim in the role that he was given. When I say that, I mean he was able to come out and admit that he needed to do different things as a coach rather than say, well, I was given these cards. I was given a hurt MPJ. I was given a hurt Aaron Gordon. I was given a sick Jamal Murray. I was given a semi-hurt Jokic. I was given a hurt Russell Westbrook. David Adelman was able to come out and say, I needed to do these things as a coach. And I think that's massive because I think what he's also realizing is what he has learned so far as a head coach and not as an assistant coach. So the one thing I really enjoyed was the fact that he said that he wants to keep his players disciplined. I know those weren't his exact words, but what were his exact words were, in December, when a guy seems tired and acts like they don't want to play, I'm going to remind them that we just got bounced in Game 7 in the semifinals, the Western Conference semifinals, 2 years in a row now. Because that's a reminder that these people need to understand, that these players need to realize, is that every game is going to count. Maybe, obviously, December doesn't count as much as a game in June, a game in May, but at the same time, they count because you need to be, he stated that he wants to secure a top 6 seed. He does not want to be like Golden State in the playoffs, and that's something that he covered. I also like what I've covered in a couple episodes ago is that there's still a chance, and he realizes that. He realizes that regardless of anything that happens because of the players that you currently have, there's going to be a chance. But like I said, there's going to need to be changes, and I've been covering this, and I think every Denver fan wants to understand this and wants to know this. And that's why we're going to hop into this topic, and that's what Josh Kroenke said was there's not going to be an organizational reset. I'm going to get to what I was just saying in a little while, but Josh Kroenke stated there's not going to be an organizational reset because we've seen what this team was able to do and this organization was able to do with the people on the inside of it. So one thing that he said that I sort of had mixed emotions about was the Ben Tenzer comment. At the day of this recording, there's still no GM or president of basketball operations. I know that the interim president of basketball operations was Ben Tenzer, and he made a comment that Ben Tenzer and him sat down and have covered every player in their development, but also stated that he did a great job, which sort of originally led me to think that Ben Tenzer is not going to be the new GM. But at the same time, why would you sit and break down every player with a guy who's not going to be the GM unless you have another position for him set? Which, again, he's been in the organization for a while, so maybe they do find a position for him if it's not the GM. But he also said that there's not going to be an organizational reset. So my mind immediately goes to Ben Tenzer. And I know there's other rumors about possibilities and people that Denver's going to, they're going to target to bring in if it's not Ben Tenzer. But I think that maybe, and I've covered this so many times, maybe you do stay with Ben Tenzer if you're able to. The one thing, again, another thing that Kroenke talked about, and this is more Kroenke than Adelman, is the fact that there was a this group is unified. This core four is unified with the bench they have, and I don't disagree with that. And like I said last episode, I think that's massive if Denver wants to win a finals. I think that you need your guys to be unified. They can't be going at each other. They can hold each other to the higher standard, like Aaron Gordon did with Russell Westbrook this year, where he said, you need to fix your attitude, which I think they said might have been a lie at this point, but I don't see that it's not true that Aaron Gordon held him to a higher standard and said he needs to hold himself to a higher standard and held him accountable rather than getting at his neck and acting like he's a bad teammate, because Aaron Gordon came out and said that that wasn't true. So again, like I said, I think that there was a unified group and it looked great going into the playoffs. They got to 2 Game 7s. They went to a Game 7 against a team that just smoked the other team in the conference finals, and that's the Timberwolves and the Thunder. But like I said, this starting 5 is unified. This starting 5 looks good, and I know that everybody gets mad with the whole MPJ contract, and I don't think there's much you can do about it, but I will cover that in future episodes, what I think you should do, how I think you should go about it. But he also said that the starting 5 is going to work, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be a shakeup on the bench. So I think that there needs to be a player they pick up, maybe 2, and those 2 guys are Taurean Prince and Talen Horton-Tucker. They both fit, and they both give Denver what they're able to give, or what they need, rather. Not that Talen Horton-Tucker is the best shooter in the world. Taurean Prince can shoot. We covered his stats a couple episodes ago. We spoke about him a couple episodes ago. But Talen Horton-Tucker gives you the bench defense that you need. He's also on the younger side, so you might be able to extend him for a cheaper contract. I think that these moves are already being talked about by Kroenke, regardless of who the GM is going to be, and by Adelman, because I think Adelman wants his team set before it actually happens. So I don't know if they're talking to these players yet, but I think that Adelman and I think that Kroenke are both on the same boat, that we need to get at least 2 guys. And that's something that I'm going to cover in this last topic right here. There are still positives with the negative, right? We obviously saw that this team at what it's at right now isn't going to work. The rotation's not going to work fully. Obviously, there's a guy like DaRon Holmes who's going to come in and hopefully be what Denver needs, and that's what everybody expected him to be. Like I said, Kornet may be the guy. Maybe you go out and you trade somebody that you... I would not be mad at a trade for Peyton Watson to get a second-round pick that gets Denver Hanson Yang. I think that Watson's good. I'm not saying he's not. I think Yang's, fits Jokic's build and is good for as a backup center. DaRon Holmes can be your 4 there. But I also think at that time, you go out and you do what Josh Kroenke said, and that's that this team is not deep enough, and he heard Jokic loud and clear that they need to go get some more guys because this team's not good enough to win a championship because they didn't do it. And those were Jokic's words. So Kroenke said he heard him loud and clear. He wants to go out. He's going to help this team out. And again, I think whoever the GM is needs to come in, go get Taurean Prince instantly, go get Talen Horton-Tucker instantly if you're able to. And then you try to trade for a second-round pick, whether that be Saric, whether that be Najee, and you go get a guy like Hanson Yang as a backup center. Now you have your 5 off the bench. You have Pickett off the bench. Maybe you don't have a backup point guard if Russ doesn't. Like I'm going to cover next episode with the Russ injury. Maybe he opts back in. You have a backup point guard in Russ, backup shooting guard in THT and Strother. You have your backup 3s in THT and Prince. You have your backup 4 in DaRon Holmes, and you have your backup 5 as Hanson Yang. David Adelman continues to seem confident, which is another positive here. Obviously, this team needs the confidence in a coach. We saw with Mike Malone. Mike Malone sort of just called everybody out, and he said that nobody wants to hear what the coach has to say, regardless if I'm right or not. David Adelman doesn't seem like that kind of coach, which I think is good. And like I said, David Adelman's confidence also led to him quoting, "It's not about me, it's about we, and we are ready." And are we ready? Which I think is a great quote because, like I said, he's taking the blame for not being as creative, which he also said he wants to come out and do and be creative to win basketball and keep his players entertained while also competing. but he also will hold the team to the standard they need to be held to. And I think that that's great. Again, I think that there were more positives than negatives coming out of this presser. I think we're all just sitting as fans and waiting for the GM to be named so that Denver knows there are going to be moves that can help this team, like Taurean Prince, like Talen Horton-Tucker, maybe a guy like Seth Curry to get an extra shooter off the bench. Sure, the development's going to be there, and that's something that I'll continue to cover, but I think that the GM is going to have to come in and sign a guy like Horton-Tucker who's younger. Sign a guy like Taurean Prince. Get a guy like Cornette if you're able to. Trade for a guy like Hanson Yang. These are things that I'm going to cover. Maybe trade for a guy like Royce O'Neal. Maybe that's something I'm going to get into in a couple episodes. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for checking it out, Nuggets Nation. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back with you guys tomorrow.